There's an old thread that runs through myths, religions, and spiritual teachings all over the world, the idea of the chosen one. Not necessarily a hero with magic powers, but someone who has been set apart, selected by fate, by life, by the mystery of existence itself for a particular kind of journey. And again, one feature shows up around such a person, a deep and unmistakable aloneness, not loneliness. That's the pain of wanting company and not having it. Aloneness is different. It's a kind of inner solitude, a standing slightly apart from the usual stream of human concerns. It's as if the person lives among others, but moves through life at a slightly different depth. And I want to explore why this happens, because it reveals something fundamental about awakening and the evolution of consciousness. And let's clear something up right away. When I say chosen, I don't mean someone is more important, more special, or more beloved by some cosmic ruler. That's just ego wearing religious clothing. I'm talking about a human being who, for whatever reason, has been pushed or pulled by life out of the usual story. Someone who has been chosen in the sense that they can no longer stay asleep in the same way as everyone around them. They are being invited or forced to see what others don't see. So why does that path feel so solitary? Why can't such a person enjoy the easy belonging the crowd seems to share? Why does spiritual realization so often come with this experience of walking alone? To begin with, the person on this path doesn't relate to reality in quite the same way as those around them. Most people perceive the world through layers of inherited ideas, beliefs from their family, their culture, their religion, their trauma, their fears and hopes. They don't see life directly, they see their version of it. They're inside a shared dream they all agree to call normal. The one who starts to wake up has, in some way, slipped out of that dream. Maybe through heartbreak, maybe through an illness, a loss, a crisis, or years of introspection and practice. The method doesn't matter as much as the result. Their perception is no longer fully filtered through the old mental patterns. They begin to see more clearly. And this immediately creates a gap between them and those who are still completely identified with the dream. Try to imagine explaining color to someone who has never seen anything at all. You can talk about red, blue, and gold until your tongue falls off. But unless they've had even a hint of seeing, the words are just noise. In the same way, when someone has had genuine glimpses beyond ego and conditioning, their experience can't really be translated into the language of everyday assumptions. So they begin to walk alone, not because they want to isolate, but because what they now live from simply doesn't fit inside the normal conversation. Others can't quite join them in that space. And this aloneness doesn't begin only after some grand awakening. It starts the moment you seriously question the foundations of the world you were given. The moment you start asking, is this really true? Do I really believe this? Is this all there is to life? In that moment, you step half a step outside the circle. From the perspective of the group, you become a bit dangerous, not violent, not threatening in a physical sense, but dangerous to the shared narrative. You're no longer as easily steered by guilt, praise, fear, or reward. The group feels this instability and often responds in predictable ways. They try to pull you back in, or they quietly edge away from you. I once spoke with someone raised in a very strict, closed belief system. When he began to question core doctrines, his inner world shook. Family who once embraced him now regarded him with suspicion. Longtime friends didn't know how to talk to him. He said, "It feels like I'm dying. It's like I no longer exist in the world I grew up in." And in a sense, he was right. A version of him was dying, the version that fit perfectly with his environment. And like all genuine deaths, that process cannot be done in a group. It is inward. It is solitary. No one can die your old self for you. That's one level of why the path is solitary. The transformation itself is non-transferable. A caterpillar doesn't go into the cocoon holding another caterpillar's hand. It goes in alone. Inside, it doesn't become a more advanced caterpillar. It dissolves. It becomes something unrecognizable to its old form. Between caterpillar and butterfly, there is this in-between state, not quite one, not yet the other. And that in-between is profoundly solitary. Then there's the deeper level, the realization that the separate I you've always believed yourself to be is not what you truly are. At first, this insight might show up as a concept. The ego is an illusion. You hear it, you repeat it, it sounds clever, but eventually, for some, it stops being just an idea and becomes a direct seeing. You glimpse or fully realize that you are not actually this little psychological character living inside a head, sealed off from the rest of existence. You are the awareness in which that character appears. You are the space in which all experience arises. Once this is seen, you cannot unsee it, and from that moment your relationships cannot work in quite the same way, because most relationships on this planet are fundamentally ego-to-ego negotiations. I want this from you. I fear this from you. I need you to validate me. I need you to fill my emptiness. All of this is the dance of two fictional me's trying to extract safety, meaning, and stimulation from one another. But what happens when one of those me's is no longer believed in the old way? The person doesn't become a robot. In fact, they often become more sensitive, more compassionate, more capable of love. But the love no longer arises from lack. It doesn't come from I need you. It flows from a deeper felt unity. They're no longer playing the bargaining game. You complete me, I complete you. They relate from the recognition. You and I appear different, but at the deepest level, we're not two. Most people don't know how to meet that. They're still wrapped tightly in their personality story, their roles, their wounds, their ambitions. They only know how to relate from those places. So when they encounter someone who isn't primarily operating from that level, it can be deeply unsettling. They might be drawn to it and repelled by it at the same time. So the awakened one finds themselves walking alone, because the dimension they're living from is not widely shared. It's as if everyone is moving across a flat map, chasing goals left and right, forward and backward, while this one person has discovered a vertical axis, a depth dimension. They still move along the surface with everyone else. They go to work, pay bills, talk, laugh, show up. But their center of gravity is in that depth, not on the flat field of social games. Then there's the question of values. Once you clearly see that money, status, reputation, and comfort cannot give you what you unconsciously hoped they would, a sense of lasting wholeness, they lose their hypnotic power. You may still handle money, you may still have a job, a home, projects, creative work, but you're no longer mesmerized by the carrot of, when I finally get that, then I'll be complete. You stop worshipping what everyone around you worships. And when you're not driven by the same carrots, you naturally step out of the common race. Not because you refuse to run, but because the finish line no longer means to you what it means to most. The whole structure of social life is built around shared pursuits and shared illusions. When you stop chasing them, you don't quite fit anymore. You're present, but somehow sideways. In the room, but not fully of the room. Over time, you might notice something. You can't take seriously what everyone else takes very seriously. The gossip, the rivalries, the politics of who's winning and who's losing. The endless dramas that occupy so much attention start to look like children arguing over costumes in a school play. That doesn't mean you hate the children, it just means you see the game as a game. From the outside, this can look arrogant, as if you're saying, I'm above all of this, but it's not that. It's more like an adult who cannot fully enter into the emotional stakes of a child's board game. It's not superiority, it's perspective, and the chosen person has, in a sense, outgrown the collective game humanity has been playing for a long time, the game of separation, competition, accumulation, and endless striving. And because they're no longer fully invested in the game, they walk alone. Yet, and here's the paradox again, in one sense they are more connected than ever. Because once the illusion of being a separate little entity weakens, the feeling of being cut off from life also weakens. The more they stand alone in human terms, the more they feel joined to everything at a deeper level, to nature, to animals, to the sky, to strangers, to the very fabric of existence. Their solitude is not a wall, it's an open horizon. This is what most people misunderstand. They think being alone means being empty, unloved, abandoned. But spiritual aloneness is a fullness. It's discovering that you are whole even when no one else is around, not because you've hardened yourself, but because you've stopped believing you were ever incomplete. Now there's another layer to this, the question of inner work and calling. Often someone on this path feels inwardly drawn towards some kind of work that requires focus and quiet. Not always a career, sometimes simply an inner task, understanding, integration, deepening. The prophets in the desert, the sages in the mountains, the monks in their cells, these images exist for a reason. Solitude is a kind of laboratory for consciousness. This doesn't mean everyone has to go live in a cave. It does mean that for many there is an inner work that simply can't be done while constantly immersed in social noise and distraction. The person feels pulled away from ordinary interaction not because they despise people, but because they sense something delicate and essential growing in them that needs protection, like a flame that would be blown out in a storm of triviality. They may be working on a book, a teaching, an art form, a service to others, or something that has no outward product at all, just a transformation in their way of being. Either way, the work asks for aloneness. But, and this is critical, this whole theme of walking alone can easily be misused by the ego. It's very tempting for somebody who feels socially awkward, wounded, or rejected to claim, "I'm isolated because I'm spiritually advanced. No one understands me because I'm at a higher level." That's just another costume for the same old insecure ego. It's a way of avoiding vulnerability. Instead of admitting, "I'm scared to connect," the mind says, "I'm too evolved to connect." So you have to be ruthlessly honest with yourself. Are you drawn to solitude because something real is unfolding, or because you're hiding from your own pain? Are you walking alone because life is calling you into deeper understanding, or because you've quietly given up on the possibility of real relationship? There's one simple test. What is the feeling tone of your solitude? If your aloneness is filled with bitterness, blame, resentment, and a secret sense of superiority, it's probably just ego in a spiritual mask. If, however, there is a sense of quiet acceptance, a kind of peace, even a simple joy in the stillness, then something genuine may be unfolding. True spiritual aloneness doesn't make you small and hard. It makes you soft and clear. Others might not get you, but many will feel something real in your presence, a kind of groundedness, a depth, even if they can't name it. The one who walks this path does so because they must, because the inner voice that calls them is stronger than the pressure to conform, because the realization they're growing into cannot be diluted by constant compromise. And yet in moving away from the crowd, they are not abandoning humanity. They are, in a strange way, serving it in the deepest way they can. By waking up inside the collective dream, they create a crack in it, a small possibility for others to glimpse another way of being, but they cannot hold that clarity by constantly losing themselves in the noise of the dream. They need space, silence, time alone. So they walk alone, outwardly. Inwardly they walk with everything. This is the great paradox at the heart of the spiritual life. You step away from others to discover that there are no others. You become deeply solitary to discover a profound intimacy with all existence. You accept being the one who walks alone, only to realize you were never separate in the first place. The chosen one, in this sense, isn't someone picked out above the rest. They are simply someone who has said yes or been unable to say no to the process of waking up. And that path, at least for a time, runs through the territory of being profoundly, beautifully, necessarily alone. Yet there is something more to say, something that often goes unspoken when we discuss the solitary nature of awakening. It is this: the aloneness you feel is not a punishment or an exile. It is an invitation into a deeper intimacy with existence than the ordinary mind can grasp. For most of your life, you moved through the world as if surrounded by a crowd. Family, friends, society, expectations, desires, obligations. The noise of all that accompanied you everywhere, shaping your identity, telling you who you should be and how life ought to unfold. And you believed, quite naturally, that belonging meant staying close to that noise, participating in it, aligning yourself with its rhythms. But when awakening begins, when consciousness shifts even slightly, the noise no longer holds the same authority. Something inside begins to notice the silence beneath everything, the still, wordless essence of your being. And that silence, though subtle and easily overlooked at first, begins to call to you with a voice older than the world. It is the voice of the self before you became a self, the voice of the one life breathing through all forms. To hear that voice clearly, the noise has to fall away, not forcibly, not in rebellion, but naturally, like leaves falling from a tree in autumn. The tree does not mourn its leaves. They serve their purpose, and now the tree must conserve its energy for winter and prepare for a new cycle of growth. In the same way, relationships, roles, childhood identities, and borrowed beliefs drift away from you, not because you dislike them, but because you have outgrown them. This shedding is often interpreted as loss, and in a sense, it is. You lose the illusion of belonging that was based on conformity. You lose the comfort of being understood according to familiar definitions. You lose the simple pleasure of blending into the crowd. But what replaces these losses is something infinitely more real, the discovery that you belong not to the crowd, but to existence itself. This is a maturation few people undergo, because it feels at first like stepping into emptiness. There is no applause for awakening, no parade, No welcoming committee clapping you on the back saying, "Congratulations, you've pierced the veil." Instead, there is silence, a silence so complete that it can terrify the ego into thinking something has gone wrong. But silence is not emptiness, silence is depth, silence is presence, silence is the space in which you finally hear what life has been whispering all along. And as you walk deeper into this silence, another realization dawns. Nothing in your experience was ever personal. Not your suffering, not your joys, not your fears, not your ambitions. They were movements of the great river of consciousness flowing through you. You believed they were yours because you were taught to believe that there is a you in here separate from everything out there. But once the illusion of separation loosens, you begin to see that your life has always been an expression of something vast, something immeasurable, something beyond name or concept. This understanding brings a strange kind of peace, not the peace of comfort, but the peace of recognition, the peace of remembering who you were before you were told who you are. And from this recognition arises a new way of relating to the world. You no longer seek validation because nothing in truth can add to or subtract from what you are. You no longer fear rejection because you see that no one can reject the self, only the temporary story of the person. You no longer grasp for belonging because you realize you are not separate from the totality of existence. When the wave remembers it is the ocean, the fear of standing apart dissolves. But still, the path appears solitary, not because others are absent, but because the perspective you now inhabit cannot be shared through language or explanation. You can point, you can gesture, you can embody the truth you have realized, but you cannot transfer it. Everyone must walk the inner path alone, just as you are doing now. And yet, this aloneness is not lonely. It is spacious, it is rich, it is the soil from which clarity grows. You begin to see that solitude is not the absence of others, but the presence of yourself, not the small self made of thoughts and memories, but the vast self in which all things arise and dissolve. In this solitude, a new form of compassion emerges, not the compassion of pity or obligation, but the compassion of recognition, seeing yourself in every face, every creature, every movement of life. You understand that others are not separate from you, but expressions of the same consciousness wearing different masks. And because of this, you can love without fear, without demand, without the tangled threads of dependency. You walk alone outwardly, yes, but inwardly you walk with everything. This is the paradox that all mystics eventually learn to embrace. The deeper you go into yourself, the more universal you become. The more solitary your path, the more connected your being. The quieter you become, the more clearly you hear the pulse of existence. And so the aloneness that once frightened you becomes your refuge. The silence that once felt like a void becomes your teacher. The emptiness that once resembled death reveals itself as the womb of all creation. In time, you come to see that nothing was lost, only illusions. Nothing was taken from you, only the stories that kept you asleep. What remains is what has always been here, the simple, undeniable fact of being. And with this recognition comes a profound gratitude. Gratitude for the path, gratitude for the solitude, gratitude even for the suffering that pushed you to question what you once accepted without thought. Because without those pressures, without that unraveling, you might never have discovered the depth of who you truly are. So if you find yourself walking this strange and beautiful road, do not rush back to what you've outgrown. Do not fear the quiet place you now inhabit. Do not assume something is wrong simply because everything familiar has fallen away. This is the threshold, this is the transformation.